Well, there's no shortage of possibilities to mull over for Scotland and for the UK as a whole as we prepare to leave the EU. I'm joined now by the law lecturer and columnist Andrew Tickell, the journalist Katie Grant, and from London by the writer and broadcaster Paul Mason. Good evening to all of you. Thanks for coming in. Katie Grant, is Mike Russell right, do you think, to say that if the UK means anything at all, then taking Scotland's concerns seriously over Brexit is a real test of the Union?
Well, I suppose he is right in a way. I mean, Scotland needs to be part of the negotiations because Scotland is one of the constituent nations of the UK, and it's as the UK that we're going to be leaving. So I think he is. I suppose one of the things that you're just sort of baffled by this verbiage that comes out. We know nothing. We're no further on now than we were at the end of June, it seems to me. Lots of people pressing forward their sort of general principles. Nobody really saying anything that's very concrete. I think the one concrete thing we do know about Mike Russell and the SNP is that they want Scottish independence. That's the only thing we've got at the moment to hold on to, because everything else seems to be just in this kind of rather la-la nebulous land, as we might call it.
Well, Andrew, I mean, we heard from the Prime Minister, from David Davis, in the last 48 hours. How do you read the mood music? Do you think Scotland's going to have any influence over these negotiations?
I think it's very difficult to say at the moment. It depends, really. I think you saw David Davis today and Theresa May a few weeks ago stressing the idea that a national consensus, which must be a British national consensus, will be a precondition towards any Brexit deal. Well, there's one thing that we know is going to be really hard to achieve. It's a national consensus. There can't, it seems to me, be one. Perhaps the best case, as Nicola Sturgeon was saying today, is the kind of softest Brexit possible, which secures the greatest access to the single market. But if you get that kind of national consensus, then you get dissensus in the Conservative Party, because there are great swathes of that party, including the Minister for Brexit, that doesn't seem tremendously thrilled about that version of leaving the European Union.
Well, Paul Mason in London, I mean, what's the view from where you are? Do you think people there are particularly concerned about what Scotland thinks in all of this? Can there be a national consensus?
Well, we on the left in England and Wales are very concerned with the way Scotland breaks on this, because it seems to me what I've just been hearing is the sound of a dream dying. I was very inspired when I covered the Scottish referendum by the belief of many people in a radical and independent and socially just Scotland, and to hear it all evaporate in favour of unspecified aspirations in the Brexit process is a bit disappointing. I think the SNP has to decide whether or not, as has just been said, the dynamic it is trying to play in politics is the dynamic of radical and socially progressive independence, or do you want to stay on a rainy right-wing island with Tories who want to take us back to the Thatcher era? It surprises me that Sturgeon wants to go out and listen. Fine, let's do that. But she has to ask the question when she's doing the listening, is now or never for independence, or now or never for a generation? And if we're going to do it, what's the point of teaming up with Theresa May for a soft Brexit?
Andrew Tickell, do you think he's got a point there?
I think it's very unclear at the moment where the SNP stand. They're clearly like poker players that want to keep every single card in their hand. I think that's absolutely fair to say that.
How long can they do that, though?
Well, I mean, it depends how long everything takes, and the answer is tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. This is a Brexit negotiation inspired by Macbeth. That, as you know, you were saying, it's very unclear where everybody is. Everything is up in the air. Nobody is articulating anything apart from vague positions and policies and values. And brass tacks are very, very far away, and you tend to disagree about brass tacks because the point of values broadly expressed is that everyone can agree with them because they're politically vacuous. So I think hard choices are not being taken yet here.
But also, I think that that Paul Mason is right. The dream is sort of dwindling away. That's because most people in Scotland don't subscribe to that dream, as was made evident in the independence referendum in 2014. So I think Nicola Sturgeon's a bit stuck. She's got the fundamentalists on the one side who just want independence at any cost. Never mind Brexit, never mind anything. Doesn't matter if we'll go to hell in a handcart. At least we'll be independent. We'll go independently to hell. And then there are the sort of wavery unionists who were who were very, very upset by the Brexit vote, and who, on the day after the Brexit vote, might have voted for independence if that could have meant remaining in Europe, which, of course, it couldn't have done, but had it been able to. But so she's got to, if the dream is going to live, she's got to bring all these people on board who naturally don't really conform to the image which Paul has just put forward.
So do you think the listening is just a holding exercise?
Oh,
really?
The listening is nonsense. I mean, goodness me, how many times? Who are we going to listen to? The wonderful bit about the listening thing is that apparently 5 SNP members, each member is supposed to go off and find 5 more other people. So it's just a kind of giant echo chamber. They'll all be echoing to each other. It's great.
So, Paul Mason, were you at all encouraged today to hear Nicola Sturgeon, though, talking about building alliances across the UK?
I think the alliance Nicola Sturgeon needs to be part of is the one that we in Labour, some people in Labour, some people in Plaid Cymru, some people in the Greens are trying to build, which is a progressive alliance to make the best of Brexit, to actually fight the right-wing Tory agenda. You heard David Davis today. He's clarified it tonight in a TV interview. He wants a clean break with Europe economically. That's the big news today. And if you want to stay on the island with that, then either you go independent and you're not part of the story, or you join with the progressive forces across the British Isles to actually fight the Tories. And I think that, you know, it's all, I've covered the Catalan national question for many years, and it's all very convenient, isn't it, to have this independence struggle that never comes to pass. It never quite happens, and in the meantime people obsess about independence and they miss the opportunity to actually fight with their fellow working class and poor and young people across Britain against the Conservatives.
Well, Andrew Tickell, I mean, if we are focusing on a good Brexit for Scotland, I mean, what about something like having a separate immigration policy? I mean, is that actually feasible?
It is feasible in the abstract sense, I suppose, but is it likely or possible? No, of course it isn't. I mean, we saw today David Davis articulating this idea that this Parliament is sovereign, and that idea always sends a chill up my spine for some of the reasons that Paul Mason was just describing. I'm not very comfortable with the idea of a Tory-dominated, disproportionately misrepresentative assembly doing that. So I think the chances, as were discussed during the referendum of Scotland getting power over immigration, are the equivalent of a survival of a snowball in hell, frankly. It's not going to happen. But I think, you know, the SNP are articulating here, I think, an admirable position along the lines that Paul Mason is speaking. You know, looking forward to an idea that we want the best Brexit possible, the least worst scenarios, I think how Nicola Sturgeon described it. I mean, people are endlessly slagging off the SNP for being impractical, for being secessionists, for being separatists. Well, what is this? This is practical politics in the UK, and if you can't be happy enough with that, if you are a Remain voter with anxieties, then, you know, heaven help you, frankly. Partisanship's taken over everything.
And Katie, you voted Remain, but do you think there are opportunities here for Scotland?
Well, I think it's my view that Scotland should remain in the UK, even with the Brexit vote, even though I'm a Remainer, in order to be the strongest voice possible within the UK, because I also don't want to see a Tory-dominated United Kingdom. I don't want Scotland to be living next door to a country which it has nothing to do with, doesn't have any influence over. They are our nearest neighbours. Most of my family live there. I want us all... I think Scotland has a very powerful place in the UK. It would have a very, very unpowerful place in Europe. So I would prefer to see... Also, Scotland has this lovely sort of habit of trying to pretend that everything is on its side. So when they're asked about the border, for example, with immigration, oh, there'll be no border, says Nicola Sturgeon. But borders have two sides. I don't think the English will be very happy with having a free immigration policy in Scotland and having so people can just sort of waft down to England. I mean, that's obviously not going to happen either.
Do you think that could be a possibility at all, or is that just Fantasyland, Paul?
Look, I think the point is for Scotland, there are plenty of things you can do with the devolved powers to set socially just policies that fly in the face of what May and Boris Johnson are trying to do to Britain. And one of them is labour market. You could attract, you know, it's been said before, it was said earlier in the programme, that Scotland has an outward-looking position on migration. You could do a lot to regulate the Scottish labour movement in favour of trade unions, in favour of higher wages, in favour of more open engagement with the rest of the world, education policy you already have, you could do that. But at the end of the day, it's weird to be sitting here
Very
with
briefly.
Big Ben behind me, being the person in the studio most enthusiastic for actually following the story of radical cultural and national independence. Because you could template on the British Isles a completely different kind of economy and society.
We're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time, I'm afraid. But thanks very much for coming in. That's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Gary Robertson will be here tomorrow night at the same time, so join him then. Bye-bye.